Alright guys, so if you don't already know, Stain is back. Yes, hero killer Stain has returned. With the invasion and subsequent liberation of Tartarus, what was once the most secure prison facility in the country, by way of an all-for-one possessed Shigaraki and a number of near high-end Nomu, Stain, along with plenty more of the nation's worst criminals, was released back into the world, free to do as he so pleased. And with a character like Stain having re-entered the narrative in this way, the question of his purpose is certainly one to consider, and the intent behind this video. Now, the last time Stain was a free man, the world was a very different place, and I mean that in a couple of ways. Firstly, society in and of itself was radically different from how it is today. Secondly, our many characters, both mentally and physically, have all changed tremendously. Now, when it comes to that first point, the overall state of society is all too important to the portrayal and significance of this character, considering his previous motivations and overwhelming impact on it as a whole. It's true that Stain's infamous moniker was that of the hero killer, but truthfully, a title just as fitting would be that of the hero fanatic. You see, Stain was by no means an indiscriminate killer. We're talking about an especially methodical and selective serial killer that in essence, at least directly, posed no threat to public safety. It just so happens that like a lone lion surrounded by a herd of zebras, his prey were in abundance. But ultimately, when taken from the comfort of solitary confrontation, he was overwhelmed by the numbers of the hunted and trampled. Remember that Stain, in his youth, longed to be a hero. Yet as someone who was able to properly recognize true heroes, the reality he found himself to be in was one that utterly repulsed him and propelled him into a depraved insanity. And now going back to our lion analogy, in regards to the circle of life, without the presence and pressure of proper hunters on account of All Might's influence as the symbol of peace, heroes were, in a sense, overpopulated. And done so by having a number of people who, in reality, had no business being heroes at all. Yet now we have Stain, who has been reintroduced to this environment that has recently shifted to another extreme wherein there are a lack of heroes and a surplus of villains. This is to say that no matter what, the purpose of Stain in the story of My Hero Academia absolutely must and will change. There is no reason for Stain to be the hero killer anymore, because in the end, the heroes that currently remain to fight the good fight, Endeavor, Hawks, Best Jeanist, Mount Lady, Edgeshot, Kamui Woods, Eraserhead, Wash, Midako, Deku, and presumably a number of heroes in training, these few heroes left aren't doing any of this for the glory or for praise. They are doing this to end the conflict and save lives, plain and simple. Furthermore, with society having hit rock bottom here, it's not as if Stain will need to jump on top of a soapbox and preach to the people once more. They have seen the dangers of false saviors firsthand at this point, and so it is very unlikely that they would revert back to the pre-established without care. Now, when it comes to our second point, Stain has again been out of the game for a very long time. His series debut being all the way back during season 2 of the anime, which was chapter 41 of the manga. From there, his time in the series directly may be consolidated to around 15 chapters or less. It took the combined forces of Deku, Shoto, and Ida to take him down, but comparatively, they were nowhere near where they are today. Deku at the time had only just gotten the hang of full cowl at a measly 5%. Ida was still running around with his baby teeth mufflers, and Shoto's progression has always been a weird thing for me to properly quantify, considering the kid has always been able to make entire mountains of ice in like 2 seconds flat. But I guess he is a whole lot better with his fire these days and has some super moves from dear old dad to go along with it, so yeah. With all this being said, Stain isn't really that strong at this point. But don't get me wrong, it's not as bad as typical shonen escalation where previous villains are ants compared to later ones, but regardless, we won't be looking at this character as some sort of powerhouse. But even still, the power of Stain was never his quirk or combat prowess despite their combined lethality at the time. It was and has always been his impact and influence. the villainous influence of Stain on the story of My Hero Academia is second only to All for One himself. The likes of Spinner, Dabi, and Toga having all joined the League of Villains on account of his final address. And do bear in mind that these three characters are at this point all that remain of the League. And so in that sense, perhaps he may have a part to play when it comes to encountering his adoring fans. But to me at least, that sort of point isn't nearly substantial enough to warrant him being any more relevant than Muscular, who got locked back up almost immediately from our perspective as readers. Now, since leaving his incarceration, we have seen Stain a total of 2 times. The first being when he retrieved a sword, and the second being when he was listening in on the separation of Deku and All Might. Now at that, these 2 scenes gave me 2 entirely different impressions. With the first one, we have an acceptance of lethality and eager preparation for a confrontation. Then, with the following, we have a more reserved and contemplative Stain. And you'd better believe that his placement here is no coincidence. These 2 are the only characters we know to have been accepted as true heroes by Stain himself. And although he is armed, I don't at all believe he means them any harm. If he did, Deku would have detected him right away with danger sense. But because Stain harbors no such intentions, he had no idea of his presence. So what is it that Stain wants? Well, with our previous chapter discussion, I expressed the possibility of Stain usurping All Might's role and doubly acting as a presence to correct Deku. But upon further consideration, I would like to retract that one a bit. Ultimately, as previously stated on what feels like a multitude of occasions, the overarching purpose of Uraraka's character is to save Deku from himself. Uraraka, more than anyone, will be the one to bring Deku back to the light. However, this isn't to say that she'll be the one to encounter him out in the streets and do so. All Might is quirkless and cannot protect Deku. My belief is that Stain will take on this responsibility in his stead, but that's not to say that he will exactly be Deku's shield, because as we have established, Deku is well beyond Stain's capabilities right now. But for as powerful as Deku is and how far he has come, he is also far from being infallible. Deku needs to be humbled, and I assure you that he will be. And in the event of such a thing, without a means or willingness to communicate with All Might or the top 3 heroes and the vestiges of One for All being just that, vestiges, Deku will truly be by his lonesome with nobody to save him, and that is where Stain comes in. And this is a situation the 2 have found themselves in once already, where Stain saved Deku from being abducted by a Nomu, thus exemplifying a willingness to protect this person. You see, Deku is Stain's hope for society. During his encounter with Lady Nagan, the necessity of an unsavory protectorate in tandem with those who act as paragons of goodness was expressed. Yet for as dark and tainted as the visage of Deku looks to be these days, his heart still remains true and valiant. And so at that, he is essentially the middle ground between All Might and Stain. A presence that can properly handle both ends of the spectrum, and that's a quality I imagine only someone like Stain could properly recognize, and that is also something I hope he will be able to convey to Deku directly at some point. And beyond that, I would love a bit of direct elaboration on the part of Stain when it comes to his origins and backstory. We of course have the information provided by the Vigilante spin-off, which we covered in a previous video on the channel, but as opposed to the story of Eraserhead being a flashback of early beginnings, that one mostly just covered the end of his transition into full-blown insanity. And this sort of convention could serve to further Deku's understanding of the villainous plight and better prepare him for his attempt to convince and save Shigaraki. But yeah, I'm excited to have Stain back in the series and see what he brings to the table now that it's pretty much been flipped. Let us know what you think about all this down below, and be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on to keep up with all the other discussions we will of course go on to have. And if you'd like to take this one a bit further, go ahead and hit us up over on Twitter and Instagram at PlotArmorYT. We've been having a whole lot of fun interacting with you guys over there, so if you've yet to, come be a part of it all, as there is plenty of room in the Plot Army for everyone, and you won't regret it, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.